When it comes to Cardano's native token called ADA, here's 3 different hypothetical price scenarios that I have on my mind in an event where maybe let's say there is a fully fledged type of altcoin season during this cycle, even though nothing I say is financial advice. The first hypothetical price scenario that I do want to explore is maybe ADA at the idea of, let's say, $8, which is around a 9x from here, and the market cap at that point, considering current circulating supply, would be around 286 billion. However, to me, this wouldn't necessarily surprise me, and the reason why is because I do like Cardano as a layer 1 blockchain. I think it's very popular, and also on top of that, I am more of a fan of Cardano as a layer 1 blockchain when compared to Ethereum, and let me explain why. Right now, Ethereum has a market cap of over $500 billion, and I think, arguably, we're not even in a fully fledged type of altcoin season yet, right? However, if something like Ethereum already has that massive of market cap right now, maybe the idea of ADA at around a $286 billion market cap, wouldn't necessarily surprise me if there was a fully fledged type of altcoin season. However, why do I like the fundamentals of Cardano in my mind better than Ethereum? It's because, first of all, when it comes to Ethereum, when it comes to the gas fees, I'm not necessarily a fan of that. I just think that the gas fees are kind of sky high, and also on top of that, I take a look at the arguable scalability issues. Again, it's not something that I necessarily like. However, there are Ethereum layer 2s out there, which kind of allows Ethereum to be enjoyed, quite essentially, while at the same time not necessarily having to deal with the drawbacks I mentioned before. But then if I just take a look at solely, right, Ethereum as a layer 1 blockchain when compared to Cardano as a layer 1 blockchain, I would just say that fundamentally, I just like Cardano better. Now, it's not as popular as Ethereum, but it's pretty popular as a layer 1 blockchain, though. It's still pretty massive. When we take a look at ADA, still top 10 in terms of market cap right now. And also, when I take a look at, again, Cardano, gas fees, I don't think they're an issue to me. Also, I take a look at scalability. I actually think Cardano is very amazing when it comes to scalability. And also on top of that as well, the co-founder of Ethereum is actually the founder of Cardano. Again, we take a look at Charles Hoskinson. When it comes to, let's say, AI projects, when it comes to, let's say, DeFi projects, let's say just, gaming projects, right? If I was a developer, just fundamentally, I wouldn't mind choosing Cardano over Ethereum just because of the fundamentals. And again, for quite a while, everyone was like, oh, people don't really want to choose Cardano because it's not as popular as Ethereum. But again, Cardano is pretty massive as a layer 1 blockchain. So it doesn't really have that argument where it's like, oh, it's kind of unknown and all this. Again, Cardano is pretty massive. So overall, I like Cardano's established nature. I like how it's pretty popular. I like how it's one of the most massive layer 1 blockchains out there currently, and its native token called ADA, let's say during a fully fledged type of altcoin season, and maybe the idea of $8 wouldn't necessarily surprise me. Now, the second hypothetical price scenario that I do want to take a look at is maybe ADA at the idea of $9, which is slightly over a 10x from here, and the market cap at that point would be around 322 billion, considering current circulating supply. However, again, just like I mentioned earlier on the video, Ethereum currently has a market cap that is over $500 billion, right? Again, if we take a look at this market cap around 322 billion, Ethereum currently has a market cap that is around 200 billion more than this. And again, this is like not even a fully fledged type of altcoin season yet, hypothetically, in my opinion. So again, this market cap wouldn't necessarily surprise me for, let's say, something like Cardano's native token called ADA, where when I consider Cardano as being one of the most popular layer 1 blockchains out there. However, the third and final hypothetical price scenario I want to talk about is maybe the idea of $10 when it comes to ADA, which at that point the market cap would be nearly 360 billion considering current circulating supply. Now, when I take a look at, for instance, during this cycle, right, what I like is that currently there is over 600 million crypto owners, which I find very impressive actually, because even though some people may be thinking, okay, like who really cares about that? Well, when I take a look at back in the peak at the 2021 bull run, around 300 million crypto owners, and that was during the peak, we basically have double right now. And what I find even more fascinating is that this is without seeing like maybe arguably a fully fledged type of altcoin season during the cycle, and we already have this many. We haven't ever seen Bitcoin at 150 grand, let alone like 200 or 250 or 300. And there's already this much right now. And also I take a look at the Bitcoin ETF. if there was a fully fledged type of altcoin season during this cycle, we'll have to wait and see, but if there was one again, if it looked better than back in 2021, it wouldn't necessarily surprise me, and that's just because I look at the factors that I see currently. However, even besides all that, sometimes people like to say, okay, what is the timeline? Now, when it comes to the exact timeline, I don't think I'll be able to find that perfect moment because I don't think there will be a perfect moment for me. However, at least I can take a look back in history and maybe take a look at some clues because typically altcoins, usually as a worst case scenario, historically speaking, they, again, typically peak around 18 months after a Bitcoin halving event, so that's a year and a half. Now, a year and a half from April of 2024, which was when, the last Bitcoin halving event happened, would mean actually October this year. Now, we're not in October yet. It's kind of close, though. But then at the same time, whether or not it happens maybe in November, December, or maybe all the way up until near the end of Q1 of 2026, because that's just based off history. Like, it doesn't mean it's going to happen this time around, like that exact same time frame. But even besides that, whenever that exact timeline is, again, it's going to be beyond my control. So all I'm going to do is just stay patient, hold dollar cost average, and that's pretty much it. However, sometimes people like to say, oh, why don't you pull up a price chart and do this and do that? Well, to me, if I pulled up a price chart, drew a random triangle, let's say I drew a falling wedge pattern, the market's not going to care about that, right? It's not going to listen to me, So, for what? That's just not my style. Now, some of my friends out there, they like to pull up a price chart, draw a random triangle. They say, oh, it's going to happen at this time, and then it doesn't, and then they just keep adjusting the triangle. Now, again, at that point, I'm just drawing. I'd rather take a look at the fundamentals. I'd rather, just take a look at Cardano as a project. Other than just taking a look at the price chart of ADA, in which case, it wouldn't really paint the full picture, I think, when it comes to Cardano as a layer 1 blockchain. Now, sometimes people like to say, oh yeah, but there's many layer 1 blockchains out there. Like, how can Cardano even stand out? Well, again, not only is Cardano pretty massive, but if I take a look at, for instance, like the world of computers, right? Is there only just like 2 computer brands? No, there's a lot, right? I take a look at something like Dell. I take a look at something like Apple. I take a look at, again, there's a lot. So to me, I don't think there's only just going to be one layer 1 blockchain and then the rest people don't really care about it. I don't think that is the case. Again, we've seen Solana do well. We've seen Avalanche. We've seen Algorand. We've also seen Cardano, historically speaking, how much it's done as well, right? And there's, of course, also Ethereum. We take a look at BNB is pretty popular. So I think there's a lot of room for, the good ones to kind of hypothetically make it. But again, I still think that because the space is pretty massive, there's going to be room for some of the good layer 1 blockchains out there to kind of stand out. And I am a fan of Cardano, but ultimately, again, all I can do is just stay patient, hold, and I just wait. And that's what I'm going to do. And feel free to subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I'd greatly appreciate it. It's been Lee the Captain, and I'll catch y'all on the next one. I'm out. Peace. Bye.